The MK Mental Health Hour with Arthur Ellis Mental Health Support and MKFM.
Good evening, it's Leah with you for another Milton Keynes Mental Health Hour, and Happy New Year. It's the first one of the new year. If you haven't heard about the MK Mental Health Hour before, we do this every single Sunday evening at 7 o'clock with John from Arthur Ellis Mental Health Support.
The MK Mental Health Hour and MKFM.
It's Avicii and Rita Ora, Lonely Together on MKFM. If you haven't heard about the MK Mental Health Hour before, we do this every single Sunday evening at 7 o'clock with John from Arthur Ellis Mental Health Support. Hello, John.
Hello, good
Lovely
evening.
To see you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Yeah.
So we do this show every single Sunday, and I'm pleased to say that it continues into 2020, and we continue to help people with various topics in kind of a bit of a safe space. That's what we like to do.
Yeah, covering things off, shining a light on it, and also providing some practical things that people can go away and do if they relate to anything in the show.
Exactly. And if we do have some new listeners that maybe haven't heard about the work that Arthur Ellis do in the community, can you give us a bit of an insight?
Yeah, so Arthur Ellis is building a free mental health support service for children under 18, and we're doing that through a variety of different streams, being training with businesses, getting corporate companies to sponsor children, because at the minute there's around 75% of children that aren't able to access mental health support for any of their needs. So we're looking to change that.
Fantastic. And you've been very busy over the Christmas period. You've had loads of referrals and things, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been, well, mental, really.
It has been mental.
Yeah, so just before we broke up for Christmas, we had loads and loads of, we had an influx of referrals. So we actually opened up in between Christmas so that we could make sure we could see people. And then straight back, the very first training day that we had with organisations was on the 3rd of January. So I was up in Derby delivering some sessions so we could help some kids back here.
Fantastic.
So yeah, it was very full on. It was really good though.
We should say congratulations because you are finalists at the Milton Keynes Business Achievement Awards for 2020 as well.
We are, yeah. We've been we're finalists for 2 awards, and it's Best New Business and Business Impact in the Community or to the community. A couple of those, which is going to be an exciting evening.
Oh, well, fingers crossed for you. It's very, very exciting. So this evening, we're actually going to be talking about going back to work. So obviously this week for many people, they've gone back to work, they've gone back to school. And with that comes a lot of stress and anxiety with various things.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially after the buzz of Christmas and the buzz of New Year, all of a sudden you've got to get back into work mode. So there might be a variety of issues that people are having to deal with. They might not have had enough time to do life admin while they've been on holiday, and then it's a sort of a bit of a juggling act while they go back to work. So we've got Mark here from Team Litica.
Hello, Mark.
Hiya, how you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for
Mark.
joining us. So Team Litica then, Mark, well, tell us a little bit about that.
So I've got about 20 odd years of running leadership and team courses for corporate clients. And what I've tried to do is create a tool that helps a team understand what it's good at and what it's not good at, with a view to both improving productivity, but also helping the individuals within their team get more out of what they do. So more enjoyment within their job, learn more, and hopefully progress either the team and the business at the same time.
Fantastic. And this is quite new, isn't it? It's only been in the last year or so that Team Litica has come about.
The practical stuff I've been doing for, as I say, 20 odd years, very corporate, but the platform has been in about a year in design and development, and the idea probably within a couple of weeks will be live, so teams can start accessing what we do, and I can reach out to a much wider audience whilst I'm asleep.
Fantastic. Brilliant.
So with everyone coming back with these issues, we're going to talk about what individuals might experience, how they can do something about it, and then from a team point of view, what a manager might recognise at work if the team isn't working well, why that might be, and how we can put some steps in place to solve it.
Well, we'll be delving into all of those things after we hear from Whitney Houston and Kygo now. This is Higher Love on MKFM. Whitney Houston and Kygo. It's Higher Love on MKFM. Good evening. It's Leah with you for another Milton Keynes Mental Health Hour. Tonight we're talking all things going back to work with John from Arthur Ellis Mental Health Support and Mark from Team Litica. So John, so many people going back to work this week, going back to school as well, so many stresses that may have happened over the Christmas period and so much pressure, and they might be taking that into work with them.
Yeah, well, you might think, people have had a lovely holiday, everyone's going to be really chilled out, really refreshed. Rested. Doesn't necessarily work that way in real life, especially over Christmas when you've got family to keep happy, you might have to travel to them, so all of these things, getting away for a while, but actually the stress and the different things that go on, especially if people have got conditions they've got to manage, whether it's mental or physical, all of that builds into it. Christmas as well because of family stresses and all of these other stresses people get under, it's really, really high on heart attacks and different issues related to that. So I spoke to a doctor from the walk-in centre this week, and they've seen loads of people coming down with things because of the additional stress of the holidays.
Gosh.
There's also, unfortunately, it's a huge time for people's relationships ending. So then you're looking at maybe changing in housing situations, there might be kids involved. So the deadline for going back to work doesn't necessarily change. So people have got to kind of sort all of this life stuff out. And sometimes you can't get it all sorted before you have to go back, and that can carry on having an impact to the businesses that they work for and and the individuals if they can't get those things sorted.
And I mean, there is that pressure as well, isn't there, for New Year's resolutions, new year, new me. You kind of think you're going to wake up the next morning, you're going to be a totally different, well-rounded, fit, healthy person. And actually, for the next 2 weeks. And then fall off the bandwagon. But then it's actually a pressure in itself.
Yeah, and that's why it all ends. Like, we can't sustain it. So looking at New Year's resolutions, making sure that they're sustainable is something we don't really think about. We think, I'm going to lose 2 stone. Not really going to think about how we're going to go about doing that or what impact that's going to have on us. It's just setting a goal. So when we get back into a routine after setting it while we're on holiday, once we get back into the day-to-day normal routine that we have to live through, these things start becoming really difficult to manage, and that's why they drop off after 2 or 3 weeks.
And Mark, one of those things could be finances as well. I mean, this time of year, a lot of people might have got paid before Christmas, and then it's a really long time until payday in January. And finances can be a very stressful thing at this time of year.
Yep, I can speak from personal experience.
Yes, I think we all can.
We all spend too much, we all think we're going to cover it, and then suddenly the realisation in the new year that actually it's going to be paid back somehow. And the knock-on effect of that is, if you are, say, hourly paid or weekly paid, you might go into working more. So working more hours is great, you get paid more, but then all the things that you promised yourself that you're going to do, spend more time with the family or exercise more, you can't because you're working more. So that's a big issue for people.
And it might even start making people think about actually leaving jobs, like especially with the new year. We had a chat before about the new year being change and looking at new things and maybe changing your job. So obviously for individuals, and that being quite motivating, that's really, really good. But from a company point of view, it's something that they probably should think about.
Definitely
being in the back of their employees' minds.
Having managed teams in the past, I always have that great conversation at year end going, let's look back at last year, which companies are very good at doing, and let's look forward to this year, but also with a mind to keeping people motivated in their roles, because people do look around in January. It's a great time of year to start looking about, but it also causes then the individual more stress as they think about, what do I want? Where do I go? Can I afford to move? Can I afford to change jobs? It's going to be stressful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to have a little look at how someone might be able to identify that within a team, which is something that you do within your reporting of all of your lovely Team Litica stuff. How a team might not be working together, how we could identify that. And then from sort of a manager's, would you say managers or leaders perspective, or just an overall company
that's
perspective?
A good question. We could have a whole show on leadership and management. I think this is about leadership. This is about people. Management's more about process. So I would come in from the leadership and understanding your people and how to motivate and manage them effectively going through the sort of the first quarter.
Okay, well, we're going to be
kicking off the culture of all of that.
Exactly. Well, we'll be speaking to Mark a little bit more about that after we hear from Sigala, Ella Eyre and Megan Trainor. Just got paid, which plays for you next.
The MK Mental Health Hour with Arthur Ellis Mental Health Support.
Sigala, Ella Eyre, Megan Trainor just got paid on MKFM. Ironic, actually, because we're all waiting for payday, and one of the biggest stressors when people going back to work, as we found out, is all about their finances. Good evening, it's Leah with you on the MK Mental Health Hour tonight, talking all about going back to work with Mark from Team Litica and John from Arthur Ellis at Mental Health Support. So, Mark, we were just hearing about the kind of issues that people might be facing at this time of year. So we've said about finances, we've said about relationships, health, the pressure on time and things like that. And you say that actually these can be kind of separated into 3 strands of thinking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So one of the exercises I run with people in teams is imagine 3 circles overlapping each other. So the first one is family, the second is work, and the third is you as an individual. And the idea is to try and get all of those 3 balanced really nicely so they overlap and each has the right amount of time and effort put into each one to give you what you want.
So I imagine if one of them is maybe not having as much time, the other ones are slightly bigger circles, and actually they can all impact on each other.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine over Christmas, the family circle will be much larger because you're spending lots of time with them. And in the back of your mind, you're getting stressed because your work bubble's getting smaller and you're promising yourself a bit of exercise, but you haven't done any.
Right. Okay. So this can then have an effect on teams and things when they're coming back into work as well.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine now you're back into the throes of work, you're putting time and effort into it, and now the work bubble's getting bigger and you're getting home a bit later, you're not doing the exercise you promised yourself, so those bubbles are getting smaller and the work one's getting bigger.
Could you do on your reports and the reporting that you do, so it's cohesion, stress and morale?
Yeah, that's right.
So if you can imagine all of these different things going on for an individual, it could have an impact on any of those or all of them at the same time, I guess.
It could. So imagine lots of your team come back and they're not very happy that we've started the new year, then the morale will be down, energy levels will be low, and then that manager's got to work a bit harder to try and get that team up and running and where they need to be motivated.
Yeah. And on the stress one, there's a stress curve.
That's right.
That's what it creates. And I can see it, but obviously people at home can't.
So back in 1908, there was a couple of very clever people that developed this stress curve. Imagine a bell curve, if you can visualize that. On the far left of the bell curve is apathy, where you just can't be bothered. You then go up through performance to the top of the curve, then down the other side into stress, and then into dysfunction. And it's both for both individuals, and you can group those together then into teams. Because
certain elements of stress is healthy, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. We all need a bit of stress to get us up and motivated and active during the day.
Yeah. So we see apathy a huge amount within mental health conditions. It can be a symptom of mental health conditions at some point. Doesn't mean if you feel apathetic you have a mental health condition, but it's certainly the beginnings of kind of a bit of a negative cycle.
So if we talk about apathy, what do you mean by that? How would that look?
So apathy is basically, in a nutshell, it's not being bothered about anything.
Okay.
So if you are relatively apathetic, it might be that you're completely indifferent to decision making. So someone might give you a variety of options. It could be, let's take dinner, for example. What do you want to eat? I don't care.
Oh, all right.
That's probably something that we've all had, or we've all battled back and forth with a partner about. You just don't care. You don't really have any taste for anything. When you get back into work, you don't really care about putting that much effort into it, maybe not even getting up in the morning. It could be a variety of degrees or varied degrees, but basically apathy or feeling apathetic is that not really bothered about what happens, why you're doing stuff. You're just kind of floating through numbly.
And so I suppose, there might be people listening that can actually recognise that either in a co-worker or, an employee. And I suppose there is another end of that scale as well, where people are far too stressed and they care too much and they worry a lot as well.
Yeah, well, Mark, that dips into, is it strain that it dips into?
Yeah.
Or, as you said, dysfunction?
Strain or dysfunction, yeah.
Yeah, so in our training, we do an exercise where we demonstrate what can happen to somebody's sort of social elements, it's called, within mental health. It's like their social environment.
Right.
And this is when the stress that they've gone through on that curve, if we can imagine that curve, if it gets too far on one side, or the negative side, then it can begin to start impacting a variety of other areas of life, whether that's being able to fit in enough time for exercise, physical activity, hobbies, time for your family, time for yourself. All of these things then just start getting chaotic and you kind of feel like you're rushing around, not really getting anywhere, and that's when you've got loads of cortisol running through your veins, and it can start demonstrating itself in skin conditions getting worse, or stomach issues, or physical health issues. And this is where, earlier on in the show, where we said about people ending up in the walk-in centre and having heart attacks and stuff over Christmas, that's the area of stress we don't want to be in for very long at all.
And I guess following on from that, if you've got a classic symptom of dysfunction or strain is people just work harder, work longer, and their decision making becomes poorer, and therefore they just keep going. What they need to do is to stop, get some support from the rest of the team or their manager, work out what the issues are, and then try and work smarter. There's a classic phrase, working smarter rather than harder.
Right, okay. Well, we're going to be hearing more about those great tips from Mark and John after Dua Lipa now. This is Don't Start Now on MKFM. Still loving that one from Dua Lipa. It's Don't Start Now on MKFM. It is the MK Mental Health Hour, talking all things going back to work. And John, throughout that song, you mentioned quite a surprising statistic.
Yeah, so this is a study that Deloitte did. It's called At Tipping Point, if anybody has an interest of reading it. It's quite long, but it's basically only 11% of people will reach out to their line managers if they are experiencing a mental health problem. So that's whether it's a situational thing that's having an impact on them, or if they've been diagnosed with a condition. Only 11% of people will say anything.
I mean, that is absolutely shocking.
It's
because
so small.
Your line manager is there to help and support you. And actually, we're going to run through in a second about, if you're kind of feeling that you can recognise various traits within yourself, that support is actually the main thing that you need with both ends of the scale. But your line manager is there to help you with those things. So 11% is an absolutely shocking number.
Yeah, it is. So in the next bit, we're going to be going through how a manager can help. But if you as an individual have started to identify that if you've got all of these stuff going on that we covered at the beginning of the show, and you feel that that's going into either apathy or the strain side of things, if you're feeling apathetic around it, there are a couple of things that you need in order to get you out of that spot so it doesn't have a longer term impact on you. And one of those things is support, that we had a chat about, isn't it, Mark? So either way it needs support, but for someone apathetic, they need a certain type of support.
That's right. So imagine you're apathetic, you're at work. You don't really want to reveal this, because if you can't be bothered, then your initial instinct is going to be that you're going to get told off, you're going to get disciplined.
And you might be working. The most effort you're putting into it is to hide it. Yeah,
exactly. And you just want to get rid of the day and start again. The problem is if it keeps recurring. So what you need is support. And either you need that from your colleagues, and that support may come through them because they've noticed you and they've noticed how you're reacting to things or dealing with customers or whatever it might be. But they're going to give you feedback. And if you're feeling apathetic, then you might not want to receive that feedback.
Yeah. What sort of support could colleagues do then? Would it be, because we mentioned about setting small goals and having little successes. So you said that was really important for someone in that kind of apathetic state.
So part of your challenges, if you're feeling apathetic, is to motivate yourself. So what better way than some success? So if you've written out some things you need to get to achieve that day or that week, then having a colleague support you to knock one or two of those off of your list, be that stacking boxes, be that writing reports, be that a spreadsheet, then get that done, tick it off, feel good about yourself, and that apathy then begins to drain away a little bit, and you can start the next day.
And I suppose that must build confidence as well with what you're doing. And, once you start ticking things off and actually having those little successes, then your confidence builds, and then you come in the next day and you feel even more likely to do it.
Because if you finish things, then that makes you feel good, but also then you'll get some feedback on it, and the feedback hopefully will be positive. So then you feel good about yourself again, and it's self-perpetuating.
Fantastic.
And we said about lists, because your list is very, very long, Leah, by the sounds of it.
I do. I personally love a list, and my list is normally about 20 or 30 little points.
Yeah. The trick is to try and keep it to like 6.
Oh.
Because especially if you're apathetic, if you're on top of things and everything's great, have as long as list as you want. But especially if you're apathetic and you haven't really got that motivation, just keeping it to 6 is enough for a day, and it's just small things, so you can just tick them off, get the ball rolling on motivating yourself. And then you can go into the stress side or the strain side, which is getting too stressed, and you said about being a bit dysfunctional, which sometimes people don't actually identify themselves.
Well, they're just working harder, staying at work longer, getting that report finished, getting those chores done. And actually, you're going to be, your colleagues will see that in you and go, hold on a minute, why are they working such long hours, not looking after themselves? So again, that's stepping in, receiving feedback, either from a colleague or a line manager, and then accepting the support that's given. Or you asking for support, saying, do you know what, I just can't cope. Can you give me a hand?
Yeah. And
you did actually mention that stress and strain at work can actually affect your IQ as well.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. So if you go from performance into strain or into dysfunction, then the first thing is the quicker you go back into it. So you keep plunging back in quicker and quicker and quicker, which then increases the stress and the strain. And your IQ is affected. So between 5 and 10% of your IQ can be knocked off in decision making because you're strained.
Wow.
That's a lot as well.
I mean, it's huge.
It's a lot.
It's huge. So really, really important to be able to identify that within yourself. Also for leaders and managers to be able to support their teams as well. If you are a manager or a leader, listen up. We're going to be delving into that after Kungs and Cooking on Three Burners. This Girl, which plays for you next.
The MK Mental Health Hour with Arthur Ellis Mental Health Support.
Sounding very nice for this Sunday evening. Kungs and Cooking on Three Burners. This Girl on MKFM. Hello, it's Leah with you for another MK Mental Health Hour. Tonight we're talking all things going back to work, as many of us have been this week, and the kind of stresses and strains that come with that. We've been speaking about the fact that there's kind of a stress bell, and you can be apathetic, you can be strained. We've kind of identified that if you are an individual and you can identify with those various parts, what you should do. Now we're looking at what leaders and managers can do to support their teams. And we've just said about that statistic, John, about only 11% of people actually go to their line managers. And actually that's the most difficult part. So now it's really down to the manager to identify it within their employees.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though only 11% of people reach out to their line managers, 60% of line managers think the organisation does enough to support. So there's kind of this imbalance of the perception of what managers are doing and what people are comfortable doing. So really from a perspective of apathy and strain, if people are going back to work with all of these different things going on in their lives, apathy, as we've said, is relatively easy to identify if you're experiencing it. Strain, not so much, because you'll just be ploughing through, trying to get more done and just sort of burying your head in the sand a little bit about it. So from a manager's perspective, there's quite a few things that you can do to initially start the conversation in both of these areas, and then get some support in place so that person doesn't have any longer term impacts of it. So if there are managers out there or leaders out there who want to start the new year right, generally, rather than focusing on apathy or focusing on strain, how might they be able to do that, Mark? What's sort of like a good starting point going into a new year?
So I think the first thing is to let the team know what's expected of them. What does good look like? So have daily, weekly, monthly targets, whatever industry or sector you might be in. Once you have those, then communicate those actively to the team, and then let the team know where they are against those targets. So if they're overperforming, great, brilliant, big thumbs up.
Lots of praise.
Lots of praise and recognition. And if they're not, then help them. This is not about a big stick and slapping people over the head with it. This is about you as a manager working hard to get the best from your team.
And if out of that, and you do all of that and it's wonderful, but there's people who are like on that apathetic side, what could a manager do to give them the bit of a boost they might need? Because we've sort of said that they might need to have small goals as individuals. They could get that in place themselves, but what could a manager do to help give them that boost?
So I think the first step is to know your team, know the people within it, and know what motivates them. So it could be that a certain individual needs a kick up the backside and a bit of a robust talking to. That could do.
Some people respond really well to
Some
it.
people do, yeah.
Some don't.
Some definitely don't. And that could be a big turn off for somebody. So if you know that's not going to work, then this is maybe pairing up somebody with that individual and saying, could you work with them for the day, getting those small ticks in the box to say that they've achieved things, and motivating them that way.
So you called it the appropriate motivator.
An appropriate motivator, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that could vary depending on who's in your team, different for each individual.
And time of day.
Yeah,
so first thing in the morning, it could be just a pep talk to everybody. Actually, at 4:00 in the afternoon, it's about, do you know what? We just need to get this finished in the last hour. Everybody step in and get on with it. That's called situational leadership.
So someone who's in that apathetic state needs really clear direction, small little goals to tick off and feel accomplished, but then get the recognition and the praise for it.
Exactly.
What about strain? What happens? Because we said people don't recognise that themselves. They'll just plough on. And from a manager's perspective, it might be that, they're
getting all the work done.
They're doing so much.
Brilliant.
This is great. But it was quite short-lived.
It is absolutely short-lived. And what will happen is that individual will keep working harder and then potentially go off sick. And then you've got a bigger problem to solve. So part of your role as the manager is to recognise when people are stressed and strained, and again, put in that appropriate level of support to them. So that could be taking workload off of them, sitting down with them. Are they doing it the right way? Have they been trained effectively to do the work they've got in front of them? Or putting resource and people alongside them to help deliver what their short-term needs.
And I suppose actually taking the time as a manager to acknowledge that they are putting that work in, show them that they're appreciated as well.
Absolutely. And it's all too easy for a manager to go, do you know what, I've got my stuff to do. I'll sit in my office, I'll do my conference call or write my reports. Do you know what? Your role is to manage people. And that means going out and talking to them, sitting with them, understanding their needs and wants and helping them to deliver on their job role.
And managers are actually in the same situation as, the employees, they're another employee. They've got, maybe if they're feeling strained and things like that, then it must be difficult for them to then go to their manager as well.
Yeah, of course. And they're in exactly the same position. So they're already part of a team of other managers. And they'll be reluctant to go to their boss, probably part of that 11% again, to go, do you know what, I'm not coping, because they're a manager. Therefore, there's an expectation that they will deliver on this. But do you know what, if their team is delivering because they're well supported and well trained and know what they're doing, then the manager's job will be easier and give them more time.
Well, some really, really helpful tips and advice. We're going to continue and give a bit of a summary if you've missed any of the kind of tips and advice after we hear from Ed Sheeran and Justin Bieber now. I Don't Care on MKFM. Ed Sheeran, Justin Bieber, I Don't Care on MKFM. This MK Mental Health Hour, we've been talking all things going back to work with John from Arthur Ellis Mental Health Support and Mark from Team Litica. So many helpful things for you as an individual if you're going back to work or if you're a manager. And now John is going to do it in a beautiful little summary for us if you missed any kind of essential part. So go for it, John.
Yeah, so going back to work, we might be going back to work holding on to a lot of relationship things, anything to do with our health, money issues, all of these different things. So the results of that with our mental health, it might put us into an apathetic state where we don't really care too much or we're not too bothered and we're just floating through. Or we might be taking on an awful lot of strain, so everything's really busy, we're just ploughing ourselves into work. So if individuals, we recognise that, then if you feel apathetic, then you can begin to start with listing different things. So trying to get a list of 6 things together so you can physically tick it off, get those little boosts for yourself throughout the day to start motivating yourself a little bit more. Really recognise the little successes that you have as well and start taking feedback rather than being defensive. If you're under strain with that, you need to take a step back and you need support in order to do that. Strain's quite a little bit more difficult to identify. So if a manager identifies that someone in their team is working a lot harder than usual or burying themselves into work, might seem great from a business's point of view. People are doing loads and loads of work, but it will be short-lived. There will be things that happen when ultimately they'll burn out. So that manager needs to recognise the person's doing too much, challenge their workload, and take the pressure off of them by looking at other resources, whether that is training, helping them to work more effectively or work smarter, or other people within the team that can take off some of that load and maybe match an apathetic person with a strained person so they can start helping each other. If some manager recognises that someone is apathetic, then they need to sit down, recognise it with them, get the appropriate motivator that works for that individual, whether it's a kick up the bum, whether it's a nice, more soft and gentle approach for that individual, and then start really celebrating the successes that they have and breaking their role down even further so they can get back into the swing of things.
Brilliant. And all of this kind of helpful tips and advice is available in your expert guide, which is going to be on your website.
Yes.
It's normally on after the show tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got a specific mental health at work guide. So if anyone wants to go on and download it, our website is arthurellismhs.com. And it's under the support guides thing. You can also find out about our training, or anyone who is experiencing this sort of stuff that might want some one-to-one support with one of our mentors, then they can find out about our mentoring as well.
Fantastic. And Mark, thank you so much for joining us as well from Team Litica. And if people want to understand how to get the best out of their team, what is your website?
It's teamlitica.com, and that's with a Y.
That's for the Litica part.
That's for the Litica.
Lovely. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. John, what are we talking about next week?
Next week we have Dr. Raj on, and we're going to be talking about depression because it's Blue Monday coming up. If anyone's heard of Blue Monday, It's like the worst Monday of the year. So actually, it's not necessarily, and we're going to be busting some myths and talking about depression.
Okay, well, join us next Sunday, 7 o'clock for another MK Mental Health Hour.
The MK Mental Health Hour and MKFM.